All right. Please feel free and feel very welcome to enjoy the last session of our seminar series entitled Explorations of Hope in the Capitalocene, Critical Theory in Literary and Cultural Research.
Hola.
This series, please close your mics. This series has been designed as an activity carried out by members of the National Research Project entitled Resisting the Capitalocene, Narratives of Hope in the 21st Century, which was granted by the Spanish Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities. The series featured 4 different seminars delivered by team members in which we propose different critical texts in order to think about their potential for our research. And why 4 seminars in particular, of which we are having the last one today? Because this is an activity that we would normally do privately among the team members as part of our regular research in the project. The reason behind this is that the project is organized around 4 different working packages, which deal with different thematic areas that we discuss as a team. However, in our desire to share the work we do with society at no cost and to provide educational materials that can be of potential interest to wider audiences, we offer these meetings as a seminar, which can be followed by anyone with a video conferencing link or having access to the YouTube. In this sense, we're also offering this activity as free formative seminar for doctoral students enrolled in Languages and Cultures, in Spanish, Lenguas y Culturas, which is a doctoral university program supported by the University of Córdoba, University of Extremadura, University of Huelva, and University of Jaén, all of them in Spain. Therefore, participants attending to all 4 seminars will obtain certification from that program. Let me now briefly remind those of you interested in having certified these seminars by the doctoral program that you need to submit a reflective report as a PDF file on your learning experience. The report may be written in either Spanish or English and should be between 750 and 100 words in length. The deadline for submission to my email, which I think all of you have, is next Friday, the 13th of June at 2 p.m. So, but in any case, further details about this are available in my previous emails to you all. And in case you've got any questions, just contact me, no problem. Okay, let me now move on to our present seminar and last seminar closing the seminar series. Today's session, titled Hope, Grief, and Anthropocene, will be led by my colleagues and friends, very good friends, Dr. Macarena Martín Martínez and Dr. Carolina Sánchez-Palencia Carazo. Let me briefly provide a profile, a short bio note on these 2 scholars. Macarena Martín Martínez is a lecturer at the Complutense University of Madrid. Likewise, she also teaches at the International University of La Rioja. She completed her PhD as a FPU research fellow. This is a research fellow at the University of Seville. Her doctoral research examined contemporary US Afro-Latinx literature through decolonial feminism and Afro and Latinx diaspora studies. She is a member of the Escritoras y Escrituras, which is a research group, as well as being the reading group coordinator of SAS Young Scholars. She holds a BA in English Studies and 2 MAs in English Linguistics, Literature and Education. Thanks to various scholarships, including Fulbright, Macarena has studied, taught, and researched at the University of Manchester, the University of North Carolina at Chapel, Cornell University, and Washington University at St. Louis. And our second speaker, as I said, is Carolina Sánchez-Palencia. She is full professor and chair at the Department of English and American Literature at the University of Seville. Her interests focus on gender and post-colonial studies, where she explores the representation of trauma, vulnerability, precariousness, hope, and resilience as embodied by non-normative subjects and communities. She has published extensively on modernist and postmodernist authors, and more recently, she has written articles and chapters on Black British fiction. Her work has been published in high-impact journals. The list is endless, but let me give you just a few. Journal of Postcolonial Writing, European Journal of Women's Studies, CLC Web, Comparative Literature and Culture, Atlantis, International Journal of English Studies, among others. She has authored book chapters included in Represented Vulnerabilities in Contemporary Literature. This is a volume published in Routledge 2 years ago. Women of the Move, on the Move, Body, Memory, and Femininity in Present-Day Transnational Diasporic Writing, published also in Routledge, and New Perspectives on Community and the Modernist Subject, finite, singular, exposed, also in Routledge. She shared her expertise broadly, but in particular, she has supervised 7 PhDs in the areas of gender and post-colonial studies. So as you can see, our speakers are, bio notes are quite interesting and very much aligned with the purpose of this research project. And as a brief reminder, the dynamics of the session. We'll start with Macarena Martín's presentation, and then we'll turn to Carolina Sánchez-Palencia's presentation. They will comment on today's text, which is a 3-chapter excerpt from Lesley Head's book entitled Hope and Grief in the Anthropocene, which is actually giving the title to today's seminar. But the book title is Re-conceptualizing Human Nature Relations. This is a book published in 2016. And after their presentation, it will be followed by a debate among team members, to which, of course, all participants, as you all know, are invited to contribute if they feel like it too. And without further ado, I have already taken too much time, more than I would have liked to. My dear colleagues, whenever you want, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christina. Can you all hear me? Well, yes. Thank you so much for the introduction. And as you were saying, we will briefly comment on the author first, and then I will cover chapter 1 and 2 because they are quite related. And then Carolina will follow with chapter 3. So regarding the author, she is an Australian geographer. She is now the distinguished professor of the School of Geography at the University of Melbourne, and basically her research is related to human and environment relations, and especially climate change. She is quite prolific, and as you can see, I mean, she's been publishing every 5 years or so. And today, as Christina has just said, we are reading Hope and Grief in the Anthropocene, which is not her latest book. Can you still see the screen? Yes, right? Okay. It's not her latest book. Now she's moving towards plants. This is something that I feel it's becoming trendy, if I can use that word, lately, from what we saw in other conferences like SAS, such as SAS. But we wanted to focus on hope and grief today, especially because I will say that in a minute. But basically, I'm gonna comment on these two chapters together. So not through sections, but through different different terms under descriptions, if we can call it that way. So I will start with Anthropocene. And I think descriptions are important, and especially that one, because in conferences, normally the group is asked why we chose Capitalocene over Anthropocene, especially because this term probably has been the dominant one in research fields during the last decade. And we normally got asked what's the productivity of Capitalocene, what's the productivity of Anthropocene, and maybe what are the differences. So according to Head, Anthropocene is a good term, and even she even says that it can be a radical concept if, and there are several bullet points to that, if identifying humans and their impact on Earth actually is translated into human responsibility for the Earth, so accountability, right? So she says, and I'm quoting here, the Anthropocene is presented as a time period defined by the activities and impacts of the human, yet it is also described as a period that is now out of human control due to rapid and unpredictable change, right? Climate change is a good example of that. But then she states that we still need to recognize that human has a lot of power in it and it's embedded to human relations. So basically a call for accountability. Then she says that this is a good term, Anthropocene, if it's connected to posthumanism philosophy. So if it's useful to contest human exceptionalism and rethink the whole idea, and she uses rethink rather than getting rid of the human concept, right? So she calls to interspecies interaction, and she feels that this human that we need to rethink could be a good in this new philosophy or paradigm should be a good a force for environmental good, or at least not essentially bad or damaging, right? So again, this is a call for accountability and action, right? And this posthumanist philosophy, she again, and I use it again because this is something we've been seeing through the seminars, through the previous seminars. She claims that we should stop this dualism, human and the rest, and also resist the homogenizing pattern that we have for all of the rest that we consider non-human, right? And then she acknowledges, as other authors we've been discussing in these seminars, that indigenous and non-Western ontologies have been doing this for centuries. So this is nothing new, to be honest, right? Rethinking the human, rethinking the relationality that human has with the environment, with animals, with so on, and making human not an exceptional being, right? However, she also talks about the risk, why Anthropocene can be a risky term, and basically the two main ideas she states are that basically could be just an extension of classical humanists and modernists, right, which understands human at the center and then explains and justifies somehow the human domination over nature. And then if you pay attention, or if you pay enough attention when I describe Anthropocene in a minute ago, I said Anthropocene is presented as a time period. So she thinks that this goes back to the idea of linear time, right? The idea that time is just linear, that goes toward progress. And as you know, and we've been already commenting, this is really connected to colonialism and colonial time and the use that has been made of this idea of time. I'm not gonna get into that much because Carolina is gonna focus on time. But these are two important risks of using Anthropocene. And then she briefly comments on other different terms, and there she goes, and there she includes Capitalocene among them. She mentions our dear Moore, but she mentions other authors like Hoover, Malm, and then she also talks about Econocene, but she doesn't really go into the description of these concepts, to be honest, in a really complex way. I mean, she doesn't go farther with that, but she mentions that there are other concepts that can be used and that have different subtle connotations, but still she prefers to use Anthropocene in that way, right? In the post-human way and in the accountability way, if we want to call it, and always getting rid of this idea of linear time and the perpetuation of humanist perspective. Then we move into hope and grief, and as you can see in this slide, they are connected because they, from the very title of the book, they are intertwined. You can see it's hope and grief, right? And also for this seminar today, we chose to talk about chapter 3, which is on grief, rather than selecting, for example, chapter 5. I don't know if you had a look to the table of contents, but chapter 5 is entitled Practicing Hope, which probably could sound more appealing for a seminar like this one, or like it could fit more. But actually, this is not a coincidence. We chose chapter 3 and this book over others to make clear our positioning, especially in word package number 4. Word package number 4 is actually titled Narratives of Survival and Death, Last versus Lost Opportunities. And basically, this is related to the fact that a lot of us in the work project work with communities of the global south, on diasporic communities in the global north, but still communities that are affected by precarity. So for us, hope is always accompanied, or hope is what emerges out of the constant collision of domination and resistance. So we really wanted to make clear, or yeah, to make clear, to highlight the connection that hope has with other ideas, other notions, other feelings, affects, like grief, right? So she presents a very short, I would say, definition of what hope is. But even though it's hope, and I hope you understand my graphic, I will talk through in a minute. Even I was saying, even though it's short, I think it's a complex one, right? She describes hope as a risky and complex process of possibility that carries painful emotions. So first of all, and here you can see that we are linguists, most of us. She describes hope as a risky and complex. I think this is already very powerful because it detaches hope from this idea that we have of optimism, of being naive, of an easy thing to do versus action. Sometimes we add in this dialectical way, which is really also, I feel, Western dualism, right? So she says it's risky and complex, first of all. And then she says that it's a process of possibility. Carolina is going to talk more about possibilities. I'm not going to get into that either right now. That carries painful emotions. And to me, probably this is one of the most important contributions of this text, not only because it turns to affect, it brings affect in, but because it tells about pain and how these two things are connected. Also, and it can sound maybe contradictory because it says that carries painful emotions and brings affect in, but Lesley Head says that hope is something to be practiced. And remember, she says it's a process, so action, rather than something to be felt, right? So it's not an emotion. Sometimes I think we mix ideas and think hope is just like being happy, to put it in a really simple way, or being optimistic. But she's clear about the fact that this is not an emotion. It brings painful emotions. And in a minute, we are going to see that actually, I think she claims that it's that it emerges, or it's a result of painful emotions sometimes, but it's a practice and it's a process and it's an action, right? And the last thing I wanted to highlight about process, about hope, according to Head, is that it can be found in unexpected places. So I think this really goes in the same tune that this idea of hope and grief being together. In really, and let me do the footnote here. My research, as Cristina said, is related to Afro-Latinx communities, and especially is related to maroon communities, right? Runaways who escaped from slavery, and so on. And I feel maroons are a good sample of this hope that Lesley Head is talking about, right? Even in super unexpected places like the colonial Americas, right, where slavery was imposed, these maroons found some hope in running away in these small spaces that were also breaking through, right? So slavery is still part of what capitalism is, of what Moore will call Capitalocene, or plantationocene, right? I mean, we have different terms we are using, but still they have the same idea of dominant systems, right? Dominant systems that are imposed, and how, and I feel she brings us hope, Lesley Head, by saying that hope can be found in unexpected places. But she goes even further when she talks about grief, right? I don't think she only says that hope can be found in unexpected places, but emerges out of these unexpected and grieving places, right? And to talk about grief, the first thing she does is distinguish two types of griefs. Grief, she has these two categorization, that it's the affluent Western grief, and she states that Western is grieving because of the loss of the modern self. Modern self as in modernity, right? As in colonial self. This idea that future is always, that we are always going to depend on future, and future is always going to be characterized by hope or by unlimited possibility, right? There is always this idea, even science is based on that we have the possibility of improvement, of progress, and this is never going to end because we are always moving forward, and the possibilities are going to be better because now we are researching more, we have more means, we have, right, like this unlimited possibility. However, because she's a geographer and she especially talks about climate change, she says climate change is letting the modern the Western know that this unlimited possibility is now over, right? We are getting rid of this. We are running out of this unlimited possibility, right? Because we have already destroyed the world enough for this to stop. And then she talks about the non-Western grief. And basically she says that for many people in many parts of the world, daily life is already and has always been infused with catastrophe and grief, right? So this is nothing new. And actually she says that affluent Western happiness was actually built on non-Western people suffering, right? But now these two worlds, through climate change, according to her, are coming together in these two types of griefs, but still grief, as she says, is going to be our companion in general, right? And then she goes into different categories of grief too. She talks about nostalgia, also nostalgia that we talked about some seminars ago. But basically her main point here is that grief is under acknowledged. First, because there is a social pressure for being optimistic about the future. And she even connects this with rational, as I said, this is science is based on that. So she connects this with rationality, with even with masculinism, with masculinity. So first of all, there is this social pressure to be optimistic, and then because grief and mourning have always been seen as negative emotions. But then we have several samples about the opposite, actually. We have Ahmed, Sadat Ahmed. We have Audre Lorde talking about the uses of anger. We have female rage. We have ugly feelings. I don't know if you are familiar with that book by Cian and Gay. We have negative affects by Leticia Alvarado. So I feel that it's been at least 2 decades or almost 3 decades now. Well, Audre Lorde, so even some years before, that been talking about the productivity. I don't want to use productivity because this sounds again like really capitalistic, but about the usefulness of grief and mourning um in dealing with life, right? And still grief and mourning are under acknowledged because they are constantly perceived as negative emotions. However, she says that since grief is going to be our companion, we must acknowledge and bear witness to it. And she doesn't really quote, I don't know if Lesley Head is familiar with Yomaira Figueroa Vasquez, which is a decolonial feminist, which I always, who I always recommend. But she has in her book called Decolonizing Diasporas, she has a chapter on being witness. And I think Lesley Head used the word witness in that sense, bearing witness in an active way. So not just acknowledging, but using it as a motto, as a call for an action, right? So she says, and I'm turning back to Lesley Head, probably she just reached the same conclusion, but I saw there was a connection there, so that's why I wanted to mention, because Yomaira Figueroa Vasquez actually has a specific chapter on that, on viewing witness. So she says that since we are all grieving, and I'm rephrasing again, grief must be our companion, we must acknowledge, and we need to grab all this grief in our hopeful practices. So again, a call for action. Actually, she says that sometimes, and we've been kind of commenting on this already in other seminars, sometimes hope has been described as paralyzing, right? A sort of opium, right? People has hope in this, but then this is actually not moving people to action. But she says that actually what is paralyzing, it's denial. And I feel it's really interesting the description that she makes of denial, or collective denial. So, for example, and again, she uses climate change. All of her samples are related to climate change, but we could be using others. And we have, unfortunately, we have many samples to think through, like wars that are happening right now, genocides, and so on. But so she says that it's sometimes, and I feel and I was saying that I think it's really interesting the way she frames it, because she doesn't blame people who deny certain um things, events that are happening in nowadays world, like climate change, certain phenomenon, that was the word I was looking for. And she says that those people who deny it, even though they are pretty obvious, right? Like I was saying, climate change or wars or so on, she doesn't blame them, because she says that it could be part of their, actually, it could be an adaptive sign in terms of evolution, right? She's thinking through the evolution theory that actually people, it's a way for denying is a way for them to cope with reality. And actually she says that it could be that they care that much, that they, their minds prefer to deny the thing that actually suffering from it. So actually denial is what's paralyzing for her. However, she feels that if you are hurt somehow, through all this, you are hurt by all this phenomenon, if this creates a feeling of pain or difficult emotions, those are constructive. because accepting accepting painful emotions or accepting the reality of loss, sorry, first, she says, first intellectually and then emotionally, it's gonna make us work through the painful emotion of grief, and then it's gonna make us adjust to the new environment and also acquire new skills and develop new possibilities, right? So basically, she says that during our grief, through mourning or through those emotions, we don't necessarily state of catastrophe, but it will give us a better chance of effective action. And again, I really think this through Maroon's communities, because Maroon's communities were, and this is just my example, just as she's providing this sample with climate change, but I feel this is not ending. Maroons were not ending with slavery, were not escaping catastrophe, but it was an effective action for breaking or was an dissident action within the system, right? So then she briefly comments on mourning, basically by saying, and this is something that is not new, that if you mourn a life that has been considered disposable, wasted, and so on, you made that life livable, right, valuable. This is probably we've been commenting on this with Butler and so on. Then she says that collective mourning can help constructing belonging. I really like that idea, but actually she didn't really discuss it further. Probably this could be something we could comment on Q&A and in the Q&A, because I actually those of us that are working with migrant literature and or diasporic literature, I think we all work with mourning and belonging, and sometimes we connect those terms, but she really and I feel there is a void here of research connecting those two terms, how grief can actually be empowering for belonging, how grieving a home nation or an idealistic home nation can be empowering or constructive for belonging, but she doesn't really go further. So maybe we can talk about that later on, what connections we made. Then she also talk about the role of art and literature in that, even though she is a geographer and actually she's always thinking through climate change. And I think the most interesting thing she mentions about mourning here, or what to me at least is her major contribution regarding this point, is that she thinks of mourning beyond human exceptionalism. So she provides examples of elephants mourning, of different animals mourning. And then this also made me think of Toni Morrison, because she has many essays on, or she comments on the fact that the sea can also grieve. And Zaldúa, I think she also has this connection of water with memory and grieving. That is, I feel it's also really interesting, especially if we want to use Anthropocene in the way, in this post-humanist way she was calling us to do, right? And in that way, we went back to the Anthropocene, and this is all for me. Thank you.
Okay, so should I start, Cristina? Yes. Okay, so are you hearing me? Yes? No? Yes, okay. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, Cristina, for your very encouraging and supportive words. And thank you all, okay, for being here, for having connected online. I don't know if this is your feeling, but among the thousands of paperwork that we have, for me, this hour and a half is really a relief, okay? So I'm glad to be here. Well, as a follow-up of Macarena's contribution my chapter connects the discussion of grief and hope to the issue of temporality. Though Lesley Head does not explicitly mention this term, I think it seems to me she's invoking the notion of chrononormativity when she argues that environmental thought is subjected to linear, progressive, predictable, and regulated uses of time, that the complex and nuanced realities of the Anthropocene put into question. Well, for those of you who are not familiar with this term, chrononormativity, it was first formulated by Elizabeth Freeman, a scholar, a prominent scholar in queer studies. And she defines it as the result of societal expectations and institutional forces combining to form one standardized, homogeneous timeline that dictates how individuals are expected to live and how they regulate themselves or ourselves according to certain life scripts, rhythms, calendars, schedules. Well, I think Lesley Head conceives, okay, the Anthropocene and thinking about environmental issues and climate change in these chrononormative ways, okay? Well, the first of the limitations, of these limitations of linear time, lies in the fact that the Anthropocene and its related Capitalocene or Econocene, okay, the terms that we are dealing with, okay, and that we come up with in our readings, are conceptualized as periods, time periods. That is, portions of time defined by the human impact on the Earth. And yet, paradoxically, they are perceived as stages out of human control due to rapid and non-linear change. Okay? Okay, let me go to my next. How do I move? Oh, Macarena, probably. Are you using the?
I already moved to the next slide. Is that what you?
No, my first slide. I don't know how to you. Probably you are able to.
Now we can see the one with circles. And,
yes, no, my first one with the one after your. I don't know how I can move.
Is that one?
Okay, that one. Yes. Okay. Well, yes, as I was saying, Lesley Head somehow exposes the limitations of linear time, teleological time, chrononormativity in environmental thinking, okay, in Anthropocene thinking or discussions, okay. So even admitting this conceptual paradox, that is that Anthropocene, Capitalocene, Econocene, and these terms are conceived as periods of time, okay? And yet paradoxically, they are subjected to unexpected, non-linear, and rapid change. So even admitting this conceptual paradox, we, the Anthropoceans or Anthropocenians, are trapped by linear time. Okay, a linear time that permeates all these discussions and epistemologies. Okay, and what she says that first, time in the Anthropocene or temporalities of the Anthropocene are grounded on the idea of a stable, pristine past, used to measure environmental progress, very much in this paradigm of modernity and the Enlightenment, okay, that Macarena has mentioned, where everything is oriented and permeated by the idea of progress, of development, is oriented towards a telos, an objective, a goal, okay? This past, this ideal and pristine past, is taken as the baseline, and everything that follows is perceived as loss. And this perception accentuates grief as a negative emotion, okay, as Macarena has mentioned. When Lesley Head is proposing, okay, very much in line to other scholars that we've been discussing, for instance, Judith Butler or Sarah Ahmed, Grief, okay, of course, without discounting the importance of grief work, of mourning, it can be also perceived as transformative, productive, constructive, okay, and generating, okay, new effects, okay. Well, this approach determines a nostalgic attitude that laments the loss of an Eden, okay, of an idyllic paradise, okay, and this parallels with the romantic dimension of Western individualism, okay, when in the context of the Industrial Revolution, romantic poets and writers were grieving, okay, about the loss, okay, of that rural, green, natural landscapes, okay? And in a more contemporary context, it also goes in tune with the concept of solastalgia that Leonor discussed in her brilliant contribution to our seminar, okay? This idea of pain, grief, loss of ecosystems to which we feel emotionally attached, okay? Also, as Macarena has mentioned, okay, these attitudes or this perception of a pristine past after which everything that comes is lost is well ingrained in the colonial imaginary. Okay, in the colonial imaginary, there is a firm baseline of pristiness corresponding to the point before colonization. Okay. So somehow she says that this conception of time, this clinging to an ideal past, is no, and of course, assuming this linear and chrononormative model is no longer appropriate or valid or accurate for the Anthropocene, okay, for Anthropocene discussions and thinking, because this model does not take into account, other models or realities or scenarios that include, that contemplate necessarily contingency, unknowability, uncertainty, okay? In this chrononormative and traditional linear temporalities, there is also a teleological view of history, okay? And teleological, remember, means that is oriented towards a telos, okay? A goal, an objective, okay? It conceives a predictable future that can be controlled from the present, okay? And she situates this teleological view of history also in the Enlightenment, because remember, it was during the 17th and 18th centuries that the sciences of probability, planning, were emerged, okay, as part of this project of modernity, okay, and somehow these sciences endorse this approach where the future is conceptualized as a calculable object, okay, as something that can be known in advance and therefore regulated, planned, predicted, known, okay. She says that this linear view of history is also embedded within the dominant modes of visual representations. If we see, most of these models include timelines, stratigraphic diagrams, exponential growth curves. Okay, everything, okay, has to do with this idea of progress, of movement, advancement towards a goal, without really taking into account, okay, as Macarena says, possibility, other unexpected, okay, possibilities, okay? So the risk in adopting, or the limitations, okay, of adopting this teleological view of human history, Lesley Head argues, is that the outcome, whether negative or positive, is inevitable, deterministic, okay, and to a great extent fatalistic, okay. So In view of these limitations, Macarena, can you move to the next slide, because I do not have. Okay. So she proposes, okay, new temporalities to conceptualize, to discuss the Anthropocene, okay, and I'm going to stop here to explain some of her proposals, okay, proposals of different, more shifting temporalities, okay, to deal with the Anthropocene, okay. She says that this model in which we have an ideal pristine past that is supposed to be stable and everything that follows is lost, okay, and the idea of a future that is teleological, chrononormative, something that can be planned, programmed, and known and calculated. Well, this model, she says, is particularly inappropriate for the Anthropocene, because a defining characteristic of the Anthropocene and all the related concepts that we are working with, including the Capitalocene, is an accelerated scale of nonlinear change and an increased uncertainty, which demands new and more dynamic temporalities. Okay, so the Anthropocene somehow situates us in a new scenario where old temporalities, linear, chrononormative, teleological, etc., are no longer valid, okay, because they exclude, they do not consider or contemplate this element of unknowability, uncertainty, the unexpected, okay, etc. Well, of course, without discounting the importance of mourning and grief for those lost places and significant ecosystems, okay, Macarena has mentioned how grief is important, okay, to mourn and to grieve, okay, for those lost landscapes, etc. It has to be also transformative, okay. We've seen how not only in Lesley Head's work, but also in Butler's, in Bonnie Honig, in Akile Membe, in Sarah Ahmed, grief mobilizes political interventions, political actions, okay, and change. So grief is also transformative, okay, sometimes not as fast as we would expect in, for instance, the Gaza scenario, okay. We wish, okay, grief, okay, would be more transformative and more effective, okay, in certain cases, okay. But well, somehow she argues that our thinking of the Anthropocene requires different conceptualizations of the past, of the present, of the future that affect the human and non-human relationships, okay. As Macarena has mentioned, Lesley Head is a geographer, and the book, well, discusses mainly climate change and politics of preservation, sustainability, and being both born and based in Australia. Most of her case studies come from this context, from these environments. But I think many of her ideas, of her premises, can be applied to our field of social sciences. Okay, well, well, for instance, when she describes, okay, how these linear chrononormative temporalities are no longer valid in our conceptualization of the, in our thinking, in our discussions of the Anthropocene. She mentions, for instance, how the concepts conservation, restoration, preservation involve an encapsulation of this ideal past that is being discussed, okay? And for instance, she gives two interesting examples. For instance, the controversial debate about rewilding the landscapes of Europe and North America by returning to Pleistocene megafauna. And we've seen cases of this. I mean, the introduction of certain mammals, okay, that have been even transformed genetically and being introduced in certain reserved places. Okay, so in view of these practices, she says, what are we grieving about? Can we really return to the past, to that past? Okay, when the rest of the ecosystems, the intervention, okay, of human activity is impossible, okay, to deny. Can we really retrieve, or can we really deny, okay, the changes that have already taken place? Okay. In relation to this, she speaks, and I found this particularly interesting to my line of research with migrant literature, diasporic realities, the debate about alien species, where discussions, environmental discussions around nativeness somehow present different views. For instance, the paradigm of living with rather than completely removing is emerging as a theme in these discussions around nativeness. And I found this particularly applicable to the social sciences and migration studies. One of the current interpretations is that these alien individuals, be they human or non-human, should not be perceived as invasive, parasitical, but simply as having arrived later than other that arrived first. This is very important if you think, okay, of the current debates, okay, about migration, okay. The critique of species nativeness opens up questions about the boundaries between culture and nature, okay, and the implications for change, for shifting, okay, those conceptual boundaries. Nativeness, Lesley Head argues, of course, she's referring to plants and animal species, okay, but I was all the time thinking, okay, of how important these ideas were for other human or social contexts, okay. Nativeness is not a robust concept ecologically, no longer, okay, a valid and firm and solid, because the so-called invasive species often integrate and support ecosystems in unexpected ways, just as migrant populations and diasporic populations change the ecosystem of the cities or of the nation, okay, that host them, okay. So these new species or alien species or invasive species, okay, often reflect changes, okay, and in unexpected ways, okay. I don't know. I found this, okay, although of course she uses examples of eucalyptus species, okay, that was brought from Tasmania to or New Zealand to Australia. I mean, she speaks obviously about plant species, okay, but somehow her ideas were resonated, okay, in my thinking, okay, about these questions of nativeness and alienness, okay, when related to migratory and diasporic context, okay. New environmental theories and practices, she says, seek to improve permeability and hospitality instead of just preservation of nativeness. I think this is very important, okay, when dealing with human populations. I mean, she, and as I think it was Susanna who at the beginning, okay, and off the record at the beginning of the session, okay, says, well, I think it's important how interdisciplinary our project, okay, becomes, okay, because although we are drawing, okay, on environmental sciences, geography, biology, etc., many of these ideas, okay, resonate, okay, in our discussions, okay, of social sciences and context. Okay, so well, somehow this idea of a preservation of nativeness, okay, be it human or non-human, is an expression of this past, a nostalgia for this past to where it is impossible to return. Okay, so well, somehow at the end of my contribution, I'm going to well, refer to a recent publication that where somehow I discussed these issues. Okay? Well, somehow in view of these and other cases, most of them based on the Australian context, which is the context that she knows best. Okay. Lesley Head encourages us to admit that, and this is something that Macarena has mentioned, the emotional and intellectual struggle that follows from embracing novelty and change, okay, environmentally, okay. Somehow much of this environmental thought and thinking and discussions and knowledge and epistemology is based on this idea of a pristine past, okay, that we try to recover, to preserve, okay, to freeze, okay, without really making the necessary efforts to accommodate change, to accommodate novelty, to accommodate these new paradigms of permeability, hospitality, hybridity, okay. Well, so Macarena, yes, okay, I think, could you please move to, okay, well, first, okay, she, well, this is something that I've been mentioning before, okay, if in the Anthropocene understandings of time, or in traditional, okay, understandings of time and temporalities, the future is oriented, okay, towards a goal, okay, where it is, and it's a space of possibility. Somehow these new, more shifting temporalities of the Anthropocene make us envision, okay, a myriad of possibilities. Some of them, some of which are unexpected, unknown, uncertain, okay. And well, she quotes, okay, from Luke Billingham, okay, was a very interesting article in Open Democracy. I recommend you to go to that, okay. As I say, it could be otherwise. Contingency and social transformation. There is no such a thing as a permanent present of a future that is fixed, just as there is no possibility of returning to this fixed, stable, pristine past. Somehow our present, okay, and our future, okay, cannot be conceived in these terms of a calculable, programmed, regulated, okay, and stable model, okay. Okay. Macarena has mentioned also, and Lesley Head develops this in more detail, okay, in this chapter, our need to pay attention to these non-Western or indigenous epistemologies, okay, because they, well, they are more familiar, okay, with this idea of catastrophe, contingency, of the unexpected, the unknown, okay. Well, in this respect, and please don't take this as a form of self-promotion. I have just published an article. It will be released in the last issue of Atlantis in a few days, where I explore. I don't know if I can share. Do you think I can share this? Just the first page for you to see the title. Compartir. Okay, let me. Ventana. Toda la pantalla. Okay. Okay, let me just, for a moment. Well, if I have, no, this is Macarena's. Well, anyway, okay. Can you see the?
Sharing. Shall I go back then to the?
No. Are you seeing the article? No.
No.
I don't
we
know.
see you.
Okay. Well.
Try again. Maybe when it says, when you want to share, you click on the box with the arrow pointing up. You click on there.
Cancelar. Okay. You see, no es posible mostrar su contenido. Asegúrese que ha tocado permiso y contenido. Inténtelo de nuevo. Ok, compartir. No.
I will make sure that, okay, let me see. Try now.
Okay. Okay, let me, wow. What is,
I gave you permission, that's why.
Okay. Let's see if I have it open here. Okay. Okay. Okay, let me check. Wow, no. Compartir. Okay, let me check. Sorry, I mean, it's not that important. Let's see. Here? No?
Yes.
Okay, well, that was, okay. It will come out, okay, in a few days, okay. And it's this idea, okay, where I also, Aminata Forna is an Anglo-Sierra Leonean author. And in this novel, Happiness, she deals with urban wildlife. Okay, of course, the novel is about many other things, okay, but in the background, there's discussions about interspecies or transspecies vulnerability, eco-recovery, social ecological resistance, okay, and she makes use, okay, of these non-Western epistemologies and ontologies, okay, when discussing future hope, okay? Well, just please don't take this as a form of self-promotion. I just wanted to share with you my work in which, well, somehow many of these ideas are reflected, right? Okay. So, Macarena, dejo de compartir, okay, esto, okay, here. Okay, back to, yes, the presentation. We have the, okay. So next slide, Macarena, please. I cannot. Yes, okay, this idea of non-Western temporalities that Lesley Head asked us, okay, to pay attention to because they are more open to the shifting and unpredictable future that is less dependent on the fetishes of equilibrium and control and stability, okay, where everything can be programmed and planned and calculated, okay. She calls forth these vernacular practices, the micro-political scenarios and alliances, okay, where we can imagine other possibilities, okay, in this context of unknowability, uncertainty, okay. Okay. Yes, okay, she proposes this non-Western, these indigenous temporalities in a strong opposition to these individualistic ethos of Western thought, of European thought, okay, and of the neoliberal societies where we consistently try to build fortresses and preservations to protect ourselves from the possibility of pain. Okay, Macarena has mentioned how grief and pain, okay, can be transformative. Okay, can open up, okay, possibilities of change. Okay, but if we, okay, especially, okay, in Western neoliberal societies, consistently protect, preserve, shelter ourselves, okay, from those possibilities, from those effects or emotions, somehow we are canceling, okay, out, okay, these other possibilities and transformative possibilities. Okay. Well, as a way of conclusion to my part, okay, and then of course, okay, we can keep on discussing in the Q&A part. These new temporalities and the different ways to enact and live them may allow us to see grief and hope in more relational and less oppositional terms, okay? Just as Judith Butler invited us to see vulnerability and resistance in non-binary and more relational terms. Well, Lesley Head proposes the same, okay, with hope and grief, okay? Well, she invites us to disengage disengage our discussions from nostalgic approaches to this pristine past to which we can never return, and to embrace the uncertainty, the unknowability, the unexpected in our understanding of the future. Adopting new temporalities, she says, make it possible to interrogate the boundaries that characterize the Anthropocene between nature and culture, human and non-human, global and local, development and conservation, and to move beyond these dichotomies so as to embrace the importance of shared materialities, affects, and ecosystems. And thank you. That would be my part. Sorry for the inconveniences in trying to share. Okay. Macarena, yes, okay, I mean, this is, and some questions for debate, okay, that Macarena has included some, and I have included others, I mean, just questions for debate. Macarena, I don't know if you want to.
I mean, we offer some questions in case this aligns or resonates with your own questions, but you can ask any other or comment or.
Okay, so Macarena has included, this one is Capitalocene a productive term? Okay, what could it be? What could be its risks? A second question, what does it mean for us to be citizens of the Anthropocene, both individually and collectively? How different is that to being modern? Okay, if the Enlightenment paradigm of this idea of linearity, progress, advancement, chrononormativity is no longer accurate, no longer valid, okay, for our thinking the Anthropocene and all these related terms. What does it mean? And how can we think the character of the human more constructively than has been done in the past? Okay, if in the Anthropocene somehow we are articulating an idea of the human as distracting, as the agent that devastates and destructs, okay, and cause so much havoc, okay, in the landscape, in the environment, okay. How can we think of the human in more constructive, okay, and positive terms? Okay. Well, that's that would be all for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I want to, first of all, I want to read Mar Gallego's post, which is in my telephone, saying to you wonderful presentations, Macarena and Carolina. Sorry, I have to go. And I wanted to share that with you all before saying how grateful I am for your presentations and how much you've been not only commenting on Head's 3 chapters, but also adding more interesting comments on other authors who were resonating with you as you were reading. So in a sense, you were kind of enriching Head's ideas and adding more of you and your previous readings to it. So I think that that is really interesting, that we keep on not only just reading authors, but also creating a dialogue with them. And in this sense, you were bringing into this seminar all these other authors who are here somehow. And it is quite interesting. And I'm really grateful for your presentations because of that, because you were sparkling and bringing all these other ideas. And I kept on writing down all these authors' ideas that you were mentioning. I really enjoyed, but I don't want to be the one asking or the one commenting. I prefer giving you all the floor so that you can ask questions or contribute with comments, ideas that you all have. So whoever wants to take the floor, you're really welcome. Silvia, whenever you want, just activate your mic and of course, you can start speaking.
Thank you very much to both Carolina and Macarena. And it was a real pleasure and to be here today with you, because what you have touched upon are different issues that are very current in our contemporary world. And I think this is the greatness of this project, that we are meeting to comment, to discern, to be able to discuss issues that are affecting everyone and at different levels. The idea that I wanted to comment, I think, goes very much together with the idea that both Carolina and Macarena mentioned, and I wanted to recover this idea from the African American author Polly Marshall of making the idea of making the past usable. The past needs to be a useful tool, not just something to grieve on, but we need to discern, to use our capabilities to discern and take what is valuable and let go of what is not useful anymore. And this letting go has to be done with compassion and understanding. And this is the only way we can reach some degree of forgiveness in order to move on and to get rid of what is not taking us anywhere. And I think this position would definitely work for the wars that we have going on today. This idea of learning from the past, because we see that the past keeps repeating itself because we don't learn from it. And this is one of the teachings of history. You look at history in a multi-dimensional, through a multi-dimensional lens. And another idea that I wanted to share with you is this, I think it was Macarena, I think both of them touched upon the idea of hope as having to do with actively stopping our wish to control. And it has to do with our understanding of time, because it's like most of the time we are in the future, we don't enjoy the present, and we are always dealing with the past that has not been healed. So we are in this roller coaster that doesn't allow us to grow. And I think part of our project is taking advantage of these initiatives to learning and reading, to opening up to future experiences that will take us through goodness to possibilities of change and transformation. That, and I finish with this, I think for me, what I extract from these two talks is this idea that hope turns into a way of being in the world. It's a state of consciousness to consciously perceive what is around in the world, and with that, through that perception, actively engaging in participating in that world and adding on to that world. I think this needs to be through at a personal level first, and then once we are engaged in the possibilities of transformation, we can maybe find solutions as groups, and then enter into the most large in the large political arena that will benefit others. Well, thank you very much. It was a very enlightening talk by both of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Silvia. Okay, thank you for bringing this idea of a more selective and strategic uses of the past, because I think this very well connects with our ourselves as persons, as individuals. Okay, how important it is to get rid, okay, of those aspects of the past, okay, that have been damaging or hurting, okay. And somehow learn, okay, from past experiences and bring them into the present in effective and transformative ways. But also politically, I don't know if I'm being too open here, but I believe in forgiveness. I believe in amnesty, okay, because this is also an important expression, okay, of getting rid, okay, from the wrong things, okay, of the past, to see the past in new light, okay, and if this is for the well-being, okay, of groups, of communities, of nations, of regions, okay, in the present, okay, I think it is much welcome, okay, from my experience. So I don't know, okay, Silvia's words, okay, also resonate, okay, in this political arena, okay, and this need to be more selective, more strategic, more efficient, okay, in our consideration of the past, okay, both personally, okay, and collectively, okay, as individuals, but also as group, as citizens, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I also agree that this conception of hope, not as that future oriented, is really important, because we always tend to think of hope in the future, and then it turns into paralysis in the present, right? So I think that's an important contribution. That's not something that it's going to happen, but it's happening, and it's a practice, and that it emerges from actual emotions that one can feel. Affects, emotions. I mean, these are so different, difficult terms to deal with, but from past and present affect, right? So then it's a practice, as you were saying, it's a way of being in the world, right?
Susanna raised her hand, so whenever you want, Susanna, just activate your mic.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope you are hearing me well. First of all, thank you, Carolina and Macarena, for being so generous, and not only in your explanations and analysis, also, as Christina was mentioning, to expand them with other authors and with connections with our previous readings and discussions. So thank you very much for all that work. And I know it's a lot in these particular periods of of the academic year. So thank you very much for that effort. And also to choose a text that I was mentioning before is not so dense and thick to read. So it was also like a space a little bit free, well, to make probably other considerations that are easier maybe to think about. I could not stop thinking about the poem by T.S. Eliot, Burnt Norton, with that time past and time present, that fantastic line. Now that we are talking about temporality, so it is like coming into my mind all the time. So my comments could be probably focused on question 3 on your slide. Also, because I think that mentioning Carolina about temporalities and how they are contingent and how they are now put into debate, it's really what we have to really think about and consider. Time is now constantly changing, and there are a lot of boundaries in that consideration. So not every person thinks the same about time. So what is also interesting to me is the second point that I wanted to address is about grief and pain. So that was to me fascinating, and how that can be productive. It resonates very much with my, dystopian and apocalyptic place that I usually work with. So making the connection of grief and pain as something productive, and how painful emotions can be, well, positive in some sense because they are transformative, is really very useful to me and very pertinent in my research. So I think that I'm going to catch this from Lesley Head, even if it's true that most of her considerations are about climate change, and it's not my particular area of research, but we can have some theoretical considerations that can be applied to other interdisciplinary areas, as Carolina was mentioning, because we are here very interdisciplinary, I think, and we are learning a lot from different approaches. I have particularly underlined one quote from the text that is on page 30. Sorry if I'm going to read that one a little bit, because it's connected with these emotions and how they can be transformative. It is only when we grieve that we will be able to remake our futures using all of our creativity, reason, feeling, and strength. It's quoting really from Randall, 2009, but I think that, again, that quote supports perfectly the idea that whole campaign can be transformative, creative, and energetic. We, of course, don't like to be in pain. It is something that we are not hoping for, using hope, but strangely or collaterally, maybe, we need to think that maybe that process of pain and grief and the work of mourning that is also present in the text, I like very much that the work of mourning, how that can be also understood and acknowledged as a positive experience. So I think that is a very transformative message, and also quite hopeful and positive message for the future, especially for those people who are in pain for different reasons. So that's all, I think, by my side. I'm going to take very much into account that work of mourning and the connections between hope and grief. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Susana. I don't know, Macarena, you want to reply something?
I was going to say that I feel like this categorization of grief and mourning as negative things, as negative affects, is also really Western too. Like, who says that this is not also part of the process, of the practice of hope? And sometimes it's there, so you cannot get rid of it. So at least let's make it productive, which is also a term that I I don't want to use it that much because productive sounds, again, as you know, it sounds really Capitalocene like, but maybe we have to find other terms for that. But yeah, I also found that really, really interesting, even though it's something that is not only Lesley Head, as we've been commenting, right? There are more other authors that have been discussing that already. Yeah.
Maria, I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I want to thank my colleagues for Anthropocene because it was a very, very nice presentation of Head's work, and she's an author that I didn't know before, and it's true that it's so useful to have this interdisciplinary focus because suddenly we are reading a very beautifully written essay by a geographer, and we can apply it to our literary cultural approaches, as you have demonstrated, also providing very useful examples from your own research. It's not self-promotion, Carolina. It's something that we want to read. So please make sure to spread the word when you write this kind of things, because it's very useful for us too. I have rather than comments, questions regarding. I don't know. I have qualms. I need to express certain doubts that I also have whenever I approach certain topics in my own research. And one is connected to the very useful idea of indigenous temporalities and how we can apply or use these epistemologies, these ontologies, which are more focused on endless, the different possibilities, not as a future, as endgame, but as something more uncomfortable or something more uncertain and something more shifting and open to change, which is wonderful because, of course, it offers a way out to the paralyzing present. And Macarena and Carolina were discussing the denial that we have at present because the future that we projected in our Western societies is no longer approachable, or we kind of uncomfortably know it, but we don't yet acknowledge, as Head is pointing out, or we don't acknowledge it in a right way. So, of course, there's alternative temporalities as a way out of this, or at least a way out of how we look at the present and the future, are somehow liberating and a very interesting possibility to approach. But I'm also concerned with the fact that how we use those temporalities without actually appropriating them, because it's a concern I have a lot every time I use indigenous theory in my own research. Is that what I'm doing? I'm just, the Western lady who pick and chooses whatever she likes from here and there in order to, expand her knowledge, but not necessary to expand our ideas when we develop this term or this other thing. So it's something that I'm concerned about genuinely when I use this, because I want to, but at the same time I'm always a bit not uncomfortable, but also uncertain, which perhaps is good. I don't know if we live in an age of uncertainty, but at the same time it's concerning, because again it seems that we Westerners had as when we are Mediterranean Southern Europeans, we are Mediterraneans, a bit different from being a US or a British citizen. But anyway, we are Western centric. We are examples of Westerners who are always taking also this idea of taking the lead in the progress as well, which is something very Western-centric, taking the lead. We need, now that we have acknowledged the Anthropocene, the disaster, the catastrophic consequences of climate change, we need to change things. And we need to take the lead to change things. And we need to make other countries, other cultures aware that they have to change it too. So I think it's, I struggle with this. Sometimes I think we should take a step back in many things and leave the space for other people. In the meantime, of course, I want to keep on working and promoting ideas that I think they are valid, but it's so difficult to juggle all this. I don't know if you feel like that, but it was a concern that I wanted to share, because I want to use these ideas, but how to, or how can we always use them without getting in depth into them? Because they could be very useful for my next article, but is again pick and choose, and then you move on with your own ideas and your own frameworks. That is one thing. And the other is about the importance of grief as well, and grief as generative, as you were saying, and hope as a practice. That's wonderful. I'm definitely going to work on this side, rather than hope as emotion, but hope as a practice. And I would like to explore also the chapter that was not included here, so I will definitely continue with this reading, with Head's reading. But grief is an emotion, according to everyone, but also according to Head, which is describing is the different sides of grief, as denial, as something that some kind of mourning or loss of this pristine past that cannot be reapproached again, but at the same time as Susanna was saying, as something productive, but as transformative, as part of pain. So for me, I think it's very difficult to distinguish. I mean, if we are dealing with emotions, it's also so difficult to differentiate between those nuances, because, well, grief is an emotion, but how can we distinguish when it's productive, when it's not productive, when it's part of denial, when it's not? I mean, we can intellectualize the term for our purpose, for our research, which is fine. But I think always it's also sometimes difficult to establish the line when, how, or perhaps the book offers other clues that I cannot see so far, but how can we distinguish, since emotions are something shaky, unstable, and shared by all, how can we distinguish these different degrees of of grief, or is just a way of intellectualizing grief, which is okay as well. But I would like to know a bit more on that, if there is information, or if it's just something that we need to keep on thinking outside Head's book. But yeah, thank you so much for this insight, and the super generative, not to use productive, because it's a term that Macarena doesn't like, and I agree. Although, well, I don't know, it's so part of our everyday life, the production of things, of knowledge, of everything, that it's very difficult to start not using it. Perhaps we should start not being so productive then. Sorry.
Okay, Maria, thank you very much, because I share your concern. Okay, when about these risks of neoliberal appropriations and Western appropriations of indigenous and non-Western epistemologies and ontologies. I mean, sometimes I feel guilty of these patronizing attitudes that we are trapped by. Sometimes I hear myself, and I hear some of our comments, okay, and this is of course no judgmental at all, okay, but we think of privilege, okay, when we think of a Palestinian or an Ukrainian mother, and you go and tell them, no, grief and pain are productive. We need are those of pain. Come on. But thank you for your situated knowledge. This is situated knowledge. We cannot forget from which perspective and position we speak. Okay. And thank you, because I also feel trapped by these contradictions, by these ethical and moral conundrums. Okay. When we speak, okay, about these things, okay, in a more global perspectives, okay. Well, thank you. I completely agree, okay, with this, okay, and I'm aware of that every time, okay, we speak about this, okay. But what if not, okay, is I mean, this is a very good example of situated knowledge, okay.
I also do agree a lot with this, and I feel well, first of all, related to the fact of appropriation, this is a really tough thing to do. I always wonder, but I feel that also from our privilege and from where we stand, that is actually not, I mean, we are powerful at some point, but also we aren't. So I feel that just by offering new lineage and new, I mean, they are not new at all, but they are new in, I don't know, in Spanish universities, for example. They are new in the Western world, just offering. I always think with, for example, with posthumanism. Posthumanism, we go from Foucault, or at least that's what I've been reading. We go from Foucault and all these Western men, one by one, listing them and just reading them. And I feel just moving from them to other authors, to other practices, it's powerful enough, or it's, are we yes, of course we are using, and still, see, I struggle to use the word use, because we are using sounds like appropriating, but still I feel like we are changing the paradigm, and in changing that paradigm we're also refusing to keep using the same heteropatriarchal lineage that we've been thinking through. So, but of course, then, as Carolina was saying, who are we to say is your grief productive? Is not. But sometimes, and I'm thinking, and to me this is really generative, if we want to say, because I'm reading now, like now I'm reading about suicide, I'm reading about hiding, I'm reading about things that are impossible to grasp if we are not thinking through grief and through this hope that is connected to resistance rather than happiness or progress, right? So these things are impossible to think, to be thought through otherwise. And then the last thing, now I forgot to yes, another thing that also worries me is what Maria has just said, that if we are using this frame for emotions, are we intellectualizing this and making this rational? Because Lesley Head actually says, and I don't know if I have the quote here, but she says emotionally first and then intellectually, and then I think she was going back again to this dualism that she is supposed to be breaking, but sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes we are wrapped also into that, but I didn't like that she says, and I quote her, probably to think if you have any reactions, but I didn't like that she says first emotionally and then intellectually, because again I think she goes back to this idea that emotions are more made of instinct, and this is something that comes first, but then actually you have to think through. And I feel emotion, we don't even have the vocabulary. See, I feel like you have to feel through. I don't know, shall we start saying feel through? But yeah, I see the risk. She mentioned some, but then she also, and I feel we all do this, we feel in the trap all the time, but that's why, or at least that's what I'm trying to do now, to go to these places that normally there is no other way, or like dystopia, Susana was saying, there is no other way to feel this through grief connected to hope. And I don't know, maybe I start using feel through. No, but it's difficult. But again, maybe we have hope in that uncertainty, in that impossibility. I don't know.
If I may jump in, I don't know if that's okay, because Maria, you wanted to say something, sorry, but you're muted.
I just wanted to thank you again.
I just wanted to jump in, just to tell you something that I know from my practice in mindfulness. and in how you manage emotions. And this is how this is usually done. So every time you are feeling an emotion, the emotion is created by a reaction in our bodies. And there is a physical reaction, and that physical reaction is a very specific chemical combination of elements created within our bodies. And this is an emotion. And depending on the emotion, you've got different chemicals. Now, whenever we are experiencing an emotion, the emotion takes over. Even though you believe you're thinking in a rational way, you're not, because the emotions are there operating and you're under the control of those emotions, of those chemicals in your brain. Therefore, even though you believe you are thinking in a very rational way, you're not. So every time I am speaking from what I know and what I practice in emotion regulation in mindfulness. So I'm not giving you a very learned talk, a very scientific talk about that. I'm just, I want you to take this in that way, because I'm not an expert. So every time you want to regulate an emotion, you want to manage an emotion, the first thing is feel through it, acknowledging every single bodily reaction. So if I am feeling anger, acknowledge anger by returning to feeling how anger is felt in your body. If I am angry, I'm giving you an example. If I am angry, my heart rate is really high. How am I breathing? I am breathing in a very superficial way and very quickly. I'm not able to focus on anything in particular, because I start having tunnel vision, that is called, and then I am only able to see what's in front of me, that is usually the problem, the object, the person, the whatever situation causing that anger in me. Now, acknowledging it, realizing I am feeling anger, and I am feeling this, and I'm feeling that, and I'm feeling that, and I'm feeling that. Just putting your attention on what's going on and breathing with it, just breathing with your consciousness of what's going on, actually helps you in lowering down a little bit. Of course, it doesn't disappear. Of course, in some situations, you are so overwhelmed by the emotion that you are not even able to regulate. You're not. How can you regulate when you have just experienced a terrible situation that is taking from you all your peace, and you are really angry? It's impossible. In certain situations, it's really impossible. But there is a way of doing this. If depending on the degree of the emotion, you can kind of not take control, because it doesn't mean that you're taking control, but of just by acknowledging it, somehow helping it to go down. This is the reason why you usually, and maybe I don't know the reason why or what heads knows about this, but this is a way you need to approach in certain practices, emotions, looking at emotions and paying your attention to how you're feeling them in your body. And then once you're now under the strain of all those chemicals, then you're able to go back to that situation and explore that situation from a rational perspective. Theory is great. My recommendation is that you try to do this and to see how much you fail, because this is so difficult to do. But there is a whole body in psychology and also in some other fields that have to do with that, with regulating emotions. So in that way, I just wanted to tell you that. And we keep on talking about, and I wanted to say something else. We keep on talking about grief, pain, all of these terms that we've been employing. And I can only go back to our previous seminars in which we were saying hope can only exist when the situation is so, the darker the situation around it, the more prone hope is to appear. So it goes hand in hand. It's like the B-side of hope is the B-side of catastrophe. Felt or understood in the way we're understanding it, not understood as an optimistic way of doing things. And this is an interesting idea that we can go back in theory and explore how many authors, Bloch was talking about that, Han was talking about that. So all these authors that we've been reading, they are talking about this. And then there is one last thing that I wanted to mention, because I don't want to be speaking all the time. I am so surprised to see, and I really like it, that we've been talking about the Anthropocene and how in the end Head says, but the Anthropocene is a term that we need to explore and see up to which point we can use this or in which meaning. So she's trying to reconceptualize it or to draw very neat contours of the term so that she's able to work with the term. And then you're asking, is Capitalocene a productive term? So it's so great that you were kind of then talking about how Head is using Anthropocene, and then you talk about the Capitalocene. And it is quite interesting because she only mentions that quickly. And when she's mentioning that, she's addressing Moore's article in 2013. And as you know, Moore's exploration and understanding and description of the Capitalocene is more developed in his later book, which is in 2015 or 16. I'm mixing it with the edited book. I think it is 15. In this sense, I am sure that she didn't read Moore, his book, when she was preparing for this, because I guess it was published kind of at the same time. So she didn't publish it. My answer to your question, because this is the reason why I am now commenting on this. My answer to your question, is Capitalocene a productive term? And now productive, fruitful? Is it, does it lend itself to approaching hope in a way that is for us sustaining whenever we are analyzing literature? My answer, definitely yes. I cannot stop recommending reading that book, because whenever you understand that the Capitalocene, as he more presents it, what he is saying, let's call things, let's address things by its name. He is acknowledging the past of the past in which all these indigenous peoples and communities have suffered Western exploitation. And just that, to me, is taking into account and is situating us as scholars as well in a position that is, let me say, not more comfortable, because Maria was talking about this situation being more comfortable or not, or how we were dealing with all these theories, that places us as scholars in a situation that is more, it not acknowledges where we are in relation to where other communities are, not only geographically, but also in time, acknowledging that past of suffering. And in that sense, that is productive. That is being true to what has happened, acknowledging it. Whereas the Anthropocene just says human beings in general, but not all human beings have caused what has happened. And that is a very interesting distinction to make. That is why I can only recommend we need to read more and try to understand more the Capitalocene, much more. And I stop here. So I speak a lot, so sorry. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
No, I asked a question because I feel like, because in SAS, for example, we got asked that question so much, right? Like, why are you choosing Capitalocene over Anthropocene? And I think it's really interesting to start by, in any case, in any scenario, saying why you choose any term and what things you consider risky still, right? Like, we are using and aligning with Moore or with whoever, but still we see these things and others. And I feel, yeah, Capitalocene states that those who were considered non-human are not part of this Anthropocene, right? But still it has the scene part, which also goes back to the linear time if we want to. But as I said before, all the terms have risks, right? The thing is that, and I think it's an useful practice to start by that, to start by saying the pros and cons of any theory, or yeah.
May I jump in? Well, I think that Capitalocine's productivity goes with these moments of uncomfortability, of doubt, of guilt, of this is also part of our research process. I mean, the fact that we adopt a term or a theoretical paradigm does not necessarily mean, okay, that we blindly, okay, believe and follow, okay, and that these concerns that Maria presented and suggested, okay, are an important part, okay, and a part of this productivity of the term, okay, these debatable, okay, aspects, okay, of the paradigm. So thank you.
Yeah, and as we were saying, and you were commenting on this before, we keep on drawing different theories from different authors, and sometimes we're working in an unknown terrain. We are not in a single discipline. We're borrowing theories from different disciplines, and in this sense, the work developed by Moore is very much rooted in his way of seeing things from the perspective of a historian. When he developed this theory, he developed it like twofold. On the one hand, he was proposing a methodology for historians to understand history, to explore history, to approach history. That doesn't apply to us. There is one other definition of the term that can be of use for us, for the work we do in literature. So we need to bear this in mind, not only when we are reading Moore, when we are reading Head, when we are reading any author, we need to try to borrow and adapt for our work to try to understand and to see patterns in our analysis, of course, and this is essential. So in that sense, that is key. The risks is that we need to, one of the risks that I see, there may be many others, is that we need to explore the theory and see, not Moore's theory, but any theory, and see how we can use that, how we can transform it in our own analysis, in our own methodologies, and whether those ways of seeing reality can help us in developing new methodologies to approach the literary event. So in this sense, we are kind of in between our practice as literary scholars and trying to be true to what we think is just, is fair in this situated practice that we are carrying out. And of course, using those or employing those theories, but always trying to redefine and reread them and reappropriate them, transform them if necessary, because they were for one particular discipline, and maybe they need to be reinterpreted in our practice. So these ideas are essential, and this is part of the work that is ahead of us in the project, I think, because if we start thinking of these different theories and how we are approaching literature, we're going to see that sometimes we need to try to explore also different connections between theories and how these connections between theories can create a net for us that is useful to approach methodologically those novels, whatever, graphic novels, any literary act. So this is work ahead that we have, actually. I continue to speak a lot. I really want to hear what you have to say about this. Or not.
I was thinking about something. I mean, I don't want to say else because it's connected with Moore and so on, but I feel Moore can also be a little bit more useful in the sense that he's harder with some people. I don't know how to put it, but I feel Lesley Head sometimes she's really soft with not blaming. You know, she said, for example, when talking about denial, she says it's also an adaptive sign, like it's part of our human nature and so on. And I feel now, see, now I say I feel instead of I think. And I think that even even though Moore is thinking of the system, like capitalism and so on, and sometimes within systems things can be blurred, so there is no accountability on people, I feel he's pointing more than Lesley Head. I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying. Because she starts by saying that Anthropocene is productive or is useful if it's a term that is used for accountability, for human accountability. And I think that's one of the major contributions, but I don't know if she then follows what she says at the very beginning. And I feel more and I think this also has to do with what we were saying, no? Embodied knowledge or situated knowledge, that you can clearly see that he's more of his background is more in politics, because I feel he's more pointing and making some people responsible, because I also feel that accountability is a call to action, and I think that's important. we don't have to be, hurting ourselves, but grief is generative. So sometimes probably, and in that sense, I think Head also had a good point in distinguishing the two type of griefs, like the Western and non-Western, because they are totally different, but still we can be joining to this. But our grieving as people who are not, who participate, who participate in a way in this building of privilege has to be there. So we also have to have a bigger accountability for that, I feel, or I think. I don't know. I think in that sense, more is harder, and sometimes I feel we have to be a little bit more of practicing this radical hope that, for example, as I said, Yomaira Figueroa is using, and this bearing witness that is, or as Carolina was saying at the beginning, that I also really like sometimes we bear witness of what what's happening in Gaza, but sometimes things still don't change, are not that moving. So I think we have to be harder with the accountability, responsibility part. So I like more in that sense. That's my only comment. Sorry that I went a little bit.
I have added Expulsions. I am sure you're familiar with this book. It is a book published in 2014 by Saskia Sassin. She's a sociologist. She works at the University of Columbia. And she was talking about, I really enjoyed and I really liked the way she put it. She was talking about the differences that we are experiencing now in liberalism, the differences in relation to how capitalism was like after World War II, in which she was saying there is a constant engineering of how things work in capitalism, so that it is not possible to blame one single individual for whatever is happening. And instead, all these people really responsible for carbon emission, or I don't know, big contaminating, polluting, or actions that kill so many different people. Now we can go back to Israel, and we can go back to all these wars happening now. How it is really difficult to figure out, to discern, to really identify the people who are accountable for this. Instead, what she's saying in the end is people suffer catastrophes, and there is no one that can be accounted or that can be held accountable for that. And in that sense, that is also very, very, that idea is also explored by Rob Nixon in 2011 in his book, The Environmentalism, Slow Violence, The Environmentalism of the Poor, in which he is saying all these things that happened 50 years ago, or 60 years ago, or 100 years ago, are now emerging and killing people. All these chemicals that were thrown in a specific war are starting or are continuing to have effects 100, 150 years later. And people living in those areas don't remember or don't make the connection between what happened 100 years ago and what is happening to their health now. And in that sense, that is very much related to temporalities. We are not, our ability to pay attention to what's happening around us and the speed at which things are moving on attract all our attention, and our conscious awareness of what was going on in the past, the awareness of what our grandparents, great-grandparents told us, and which were somehow transmitted in the family, that is lost. So that is all of these authors can be connected to what we are talking about in a very interesting way. Lack of accountability, or inability to remember beyond everyday life practices in which our attention is completely raptured, kidnapped. So that is quite interesting. Yeah. That's all from me. Sorry.
I was just a last contribution. I was as a follow-up of what Cristina was saying. Okay, I was thinking about this other book by Martínez Alier, El ecologismo de los pobres, conflictos ambientales y lenguaje de valoración, where environmental issues are very much connected with questions of political justice and activism. Okay, because I think it's also important. Okay. And thank you very much. Do you think we can finish now? Because I have another meeting now. I don't know. I hate saying this because the discussions and the debate is so interesting. But I had planned a meeting at. Is it okay?
I just wanted to say I just wanted to say one thing. There is going to be a real pity not to continue with these sessions. I'm very sorry that this is the last one, because it's like a good space to think and to share ideas. So it's just a moment of a little bit of sadness to me, just thinking that there will be no more for a time at least. Thank you again, Carolina and Macarena, for everything today.
It's been a pleasure. So, Cristina, when do we meet next?
Well, I will be telling you when we meet next, possibly this evening. I will email you all to give you a date and a time, because I still need to fish 2 more answers, and I will let you know. But I don't want to say goodbye to you all without saying how grateful I feel for being able to share this space with you, to learn from you. Like every time we meet, I don't want to continue talking because I will start crying. My emotions will overwhelm me, and I will not be able to think rationally. But of course, I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart, how much I learned from listening to you, spending time with you, sharing this space in which not only we have people in our research project, but also a number of students who decide that suddenly this is interesting and they want to be here with us. And I really think that this is something that we need to continue doing. I hope that it was not very straining for you, but I am so grateful for having you, for counting on your reading ideas, openness to debate, to agree, to disagree, to create new spaces, new theoretical possibilities, to voice our fears, our doubts, because those are essential in helping us grow and expand what we are doing. I don't know. I just want to say thank you. I am so grateful, so happy to be part of this group. This wouldn't be the same without any single person in this meeting today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, see you next, whenever the group meeting, is held.
Yes.
Thank you very much, guys. I have to quit because
yes, I will stop recording.
Okay. Bye-bye.